Welcome. Tonight, we'll drift together into a quieter world. A place where time moves slowly and the air smells of rain and earth. As you settle in, let your body grow heavy. Let your breath fall into an easy rhythm. Each sound, each word will guide you closer to rest. Now, imagine the gentle glow of a small fire, the crackle of wood, a soft chair, a blanket pulled over your legs. Outside, the night stretches across the hills, and far, far away, before the shire and before the ring, there walk the small folk, the hobbits. They were wanderers once, travelers beneath moonlight and mist. No map marked their way, no song carried their names. While kings built cities of stone, the hobbits built peace in laughter, in gardens, in warm bread shared with friends. They lived quietly between the footsteps of giants, and the world, in its great hurry, barely noticed them. So, tonight, we go back to their beginning, before comfort, before home, before Bilbo ever opened his round green door. Let the rhythm of the fire slow your thoughts. Let the sound of my voice guide you along the old paths of Middle-earth, through valleys wrapped in fog, past rivers that whisper to the stars. You don't need to remember the way. You only need to listen. The road will carry you, not toward adventure, but toward rest. And as the world outside fades into quiet, our story begins. The hidden history of the hobbits, and how the smallest folk found peace in a world far too large for them. Long before the Shire, before Bilbo Baggins packed his pipe and stepped out his round green door, before the ring slipped quietly into legend, there were only the small folk, wandering shapes in the distance, soft footprints pressed into damp soil, a people so unassuming that even history itself almost forgot to mention them. No banners marked their camps, no kings called them to war. They drifted through the wide lands like a whisper carried by the wind. And in that silence, the tale of the hobbits began. Even the elves, who notice almost everything, rarely saw them. When they did, they spoke softly, saying, "There go the halflings." And though the name began as curiosity, it became affection, and then identity. The hobbits were not yet the merry gardeners and storytellers of the Shire. They were wanderers of the wild wood, survivors of gentle hearts, moving quietly between the shadows of larger stories. They believed in comfort, in warmth, in full stomachs and laughter. They believed that peace was something worth protecting, not with swords, but with kindness and with staying out of trouble. No one truly knows where the first of them came from. Some say they awoke east of the Misty Mountains, near the long silver curve of the Anduin River. Others claim they were born in the meadows farther north, where reeds sway and the water runs clear even in winter. The hobbits themselves never agreed, and most didn't care. Ask a Harfoot where his people began, and he might shrug and say, "We began wherever the mushrooms grow best." That was their way, practical, humorous, humble. But traces remain, faint songs about endless journeys, old words in their speech that echoed the tongues of men, and habits too old to name. From the beginning, they lived close to the earth. They learned to listen to the soil, to read the sky, and to follow the seasons like a calendar written by nature itself. They slept in dugout hollows, cooked over tiny fires that gave little smoke, and never stayed long enough in one place for trouble to find them. From this hidden ancestry grew three distinct branches: the Harfoots, the Fallowhides, and the Stoors. Each had their own shape and spirit, like three leaves from the same green stem. The Harfoots were the most numerous and the oldest. Small, brown-skinned, dark-haired, and quick. Their feet were leathery and strong, and they could walk barefoot through bramble without flinching. They preferred hillsides and high country, where they could see far in every direction. A Harfoot village was a quiet thing, only a line of small doorways hidden in a grassy slope, smoke curling like thin gray ribbons into the dawn. They woke early, gathered berries, baked coarse bread, and told stories of the weather. At dusk, they sat outside their holes with clay pipes, humming songs about harvests and hearths. To them, adventure meant finding a new kind of mushroom or a patch of untouched soil for planting turnips. Harfoots disliked rivers and forests. They trusted dry ground and open paths. If danger came, they vanished like mist, leaving only footprints that the wind erased by morning. The Fallowhides were taller by an inch or two, lighter of skin, sharper of eye. They loved the woods and spoke more freely with elves and wandering men. Their hair was often fair, their voices musical, their tempers bright. They had a curiosity that sometimes led them into trouble and occasionally into greatness. While Harfoots built and stayed, Fallowhides wandered and wondered. They hunted deer in northern forests, learned songs from passing elves, and studied the ways of birds. Some say it was the Fallowhide blood that later stirred in Bilbo and Frodo, that faint itch to see mountains, to hear languages, to walk farther than comfort allowed. Their courage was quiet but fierce, born not of pride but of wonder. The Stoors were broader and heavier, with deep voices and strong hands. They loved rivers, marshes, and the feel of cool mud between their toes. Their homes were built of reeds and driftwood, and they moved by boat more often than by foot. They fished with woven nets and carved oars from willow trunks. Where the Harfoots prized caution and the Fallowhides curiosity, the Stoors valued endurance. They could weather floods and storms, and when the current pulled hard, they rowed harder. Their laughter was loud, their meals larger still. They were fond of beer, of telling stories twice, and of arguing only for the fun of it. From the stores came the rare hobbits who wore boots in the mud, and who could swim even in cold spring water. And long ages later, from their line came one of the strangest of all, a creature once called Smeagol, who would forget his own name beneath the weight of a ring. Despite their differences, the three clans shared a single spirit. They distrusted war, shunned glory, and admired a tidy home. They preferred full pantries to full purses. And while the rest of Middle-earth sought power, they sought peace. They measured the worth of a day by its meals: breakfast, second breakfast, 11s, lunch, tea, supper, and a midnight bite if the mood was right. They believed that good food and good company could heal almost anything. Their songs were short, their jokes gentle, their quarrels quickly forgotten. Children learned early to be polite, to share, and to keep quiet when bigger folk were near. They did not carve monuments, but every garden they tended was a kind of art. Each row of beans or bed of flowers said, "We were here, and we made this place kind." The hobbits honored the passing of seasons more faithfully than any calendar. Spring meant the sowing of seeds and the mending of paths. Summer brought music, dancing, and long evenings where fireflies rose like sparks from the grass. Autumn was their favorite, harvest feasts that lasted for days, where tables bowed under pies and roasted roots. And winter was for stories. On cold nights, they gathered around the fire, wrapped in blankets, listening to the elders speak of faraway lands and forgotten times. Some tales were true, most were not, but all ended the same way, with laughter, yarns, and the quiet satisfaction of having shared the warmth. They believed that dreams were gentle messages from the world itself, reminders to rest, to love, and to keep close to home. And though they were simple folk, they carried a kind of wisdom older than words, that happiness grows best in small places. Now and then, the wandering hobbits met the greater peoples of the world. To men, they seemed like sprites or lost children. To elves, they were curiosities, shy but bright-eyed, like forest birds that sing only when no one is watching. The Fallowhides learned stories from the elves, how to shape a melody, how to speak kindly to trees. The stores traded with rivermen for salt, cloth, and tools. The Harfoots simply waved from afar and stayed out of sight. These meetings were rare and brief. No alliances were forged, no wars begun. Hobbits had no need for power, and the world in turn had little reason to trouble them. They slipped quietly through the cracks of history, living between the lines of grander tales. While the small folk tended their fires, empires rose and fell beyond the horizon. Great wars flared like distant storms. Elven kings sang under starlight. Dwarves delved too deep, and shadows crept through dark lands. Yet the hobbits kept to the edges of maps. They learned to trust in ordinary things: the warmth of bread, the weight of a teacup, the smell of wet soil after rain. In these small certainties, they found safety. And though they never sought wisdom, they stumbled upon it daily. For to live simply in a complicated world is itself a kind of magic. There were dangers, of course. Wolves in the hills, floods in the valleys, bandits on lonely roads. But hobbits survived by cleverness rather than courage. When a threat came, they vanished, behind a hedge, beneath a root, under a fallen log. Patience was their shield. They waited, listened, and when silence returned, so did they. Their courage was the quiet kind, the sort that keeps tending the garden while thunder growls far away. They had no heroes, only helpers, no legends, only lives well lived. Over time, their wanderings began to slow. Families grew larger. Paths became familiar. They started to dream of a place where they could settle without fear of being found. The Harfoots moved steadily west, following gentle valleys. The Fallowhides roamed beside them, curious about every forest they crossed. The Stoors paddled their boats downriver, singing to keep rhythm with the oars. In the end, all three branches found themselves gazing upon a stretch of land that seemed made for peace. Soft green hills, quiet rivers, and soil rich enough to promise plenty. They didn't name it then, but one day, many years later, others would call it the Shire. They tested the ground, planted seeds, and waited. The earth answered kindly. Grass thickened, crops grew, and for the first time, the hobbits felt they might have reached the end of their journey. As night fell on those early days, campfires glowed like stars scattered across the fields. Children laughed softly before sleep. Elders hummed half-remembered tunes, and the wind carried the smell of herbs and ash. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled, but the hobbits did not fear them. They had found a rhythm the world could not easily break. No chronicler recorded their deeds. No historian wrote their names. But perhaps that was for the best. Their gift to Middle-earth was not greatness, but gentleness. They reminded the world that the smallest hands can build the strongest homes, and that joy needs no audience. And so, beneath a sky older than memory, the first hobbits closed their eyes beside their fires. The stars turned overhead. The land slept with them. And in that silence, something beautiful began to grow. The promise of the Shire, the dream of peace that would one day cradle all Middle-earth's weary hearts. Thus ended the wandering years and began the age of home. For in every hobbit heart there beats a simple truth, that happiness is not found by reaching farther, but by settling softly where love already lives. Morning crept slowly over the wild hills of the east. Mist clung to the ground like a second breath, and the small folk, those quiet wanderers, stirred from sleep. They had lived long among the reeds and river banks of the Anduin, but the world around them was changing. Rumors drifted downriver like fallen leaves. Great wars in the south, strange shadows in the east, and men with iron in their eyes marching ever closer. The hobbits did not understand the talk of kings or dark powers. They only felt the unease that came before a storm. And so, One by one, family by family, they began to move. Not in armies, not in haste, but quietly, like the turning of a season that no one notices until the leaves are gone. It began with the Harfoots. They were wanderers already, their feet used to dusty paths. They packed their lives into wicker carts, clay pots, bundles of herbs, and small children who laughed even as they were carried toward the unknown. Behind them came the Followhides, taller and fairer, curious to see what lay beyond the next hill. The Stoors lingered longer by their rivers, reluctant to leave the sound of water. But in time, even they followed, paddling westward until the current turned them toward new lands. For days, the small caravans wound along the river's edge. By night, they made small fires, always hidden behind rocks or hills, and whispered songs to keep the dark away. Their world was vast and wild, filled with eyes that glowed from the tree line and wings that swept silently through the dusk. Yet the hobbits pressed on, for they had learned a secret that stronger folk often forgot: that courage can be quiet, that survival need not roar. The wandering years were long. Generations passed beneath the same stars. Children grew up never knowing the meaning of home. To them, the road was home, a ribbon of earth stretching endlessly west. Each morning they broke camp, folding blankets still warm from sleep, checking the wheels of the carts, tying the kettles that clinked softly as they moved. The air smelled of grass and dust. Their feet left faint prints that the wind soon erased. Sometimes they followed deer paths, sometimes the course of a small stream, sometimes nothing at all, just the pull of the setting sun. They sang to mark the miles, low songs about breakfast and boots, about rain that never stopped, about mushrooms found by luck. The melodies were simple, the words half forgotten by dusk, but the rhythm kept their hearts steady. The world was not kind to wanderers. There were wolves in the north, and men in armor who did not smile. Once, a great fire lit the horizon, and the hobbits hid for 3 nights beneath a hillside while the sky burned red. They learned to move silently, to step only where the grass was thick, to speak in whispers even when they were alone. Mothers taught their children how to freeze at the sound of hoofbeats, how to vanish into thickets until danger passed. They learned to read the signs of the land, the tilt of birds in flight, the smell of ash in the air, the sudden silence that meant something larger was moving nearby. From fear, they learned wisdom, and from wisdom, they built peace. They became invisible, not by magic, but by mastery of stillness. After many years, the travelers reached a land wide and golden. It was a place of endless meadow, where the wind rolled like a sea over tall grass. Here they rested longer than usual. They built small shelters from branches and clay, and for the first time in a long while, they planted gardens. The seeds they had carried wrapped in cloth, seeds of barley, peas, and beans, took root. Tiny green shoots pushed through the soil, and the hobbits watched in wonder as the earth remembered them. For a while, they thought they had found their home. But the ground trembled one morning with distant thunder, not from storms, but from armies moving beyond the hills. And so they moved again, quietly, together, westward still. As they went, their stories multiplied. One traveler would tell of a river spirit who guided lost children back to camp. Another spoke of an elf who left gifts of fruit beside the path. Some believed these were true. Others said they were dreams. But everyone listened, for stories were the campfire of the mind. Each night when fires burned low, the elders told tales of the old homeland by the Anduin. Few remembered its exact shape, but the memory itself, green water, starlight on reeds, the laughter of kin, was enough to keep them walking. Their legends grew like vines, twisting around truth, turning history into comfort. And perhaps that is how all people survive the long road, not through strength, but through stories shared softly in the dark. Years turned to decades. The Harfoots led, steady and cautious. The Fallowhides scouted ahead, restless and bold. The Stores, slower but steadfast, came last, their songs echoing across the plains. Sometimes they met along the way. A Harfoot caravan might trade herbs for fish from the Stores or share firelight with the Fallowhides under a willow grove. For a few nights, laughter joined the wind, and the road felt less lonely. Then, as always, they parted. But the memory of those meetings lingered, threading one clan to another, like beads on a string. Beyond the meadows lay forests old as the world. The trees rose like pillars, their roots knotted deep into forgotten ages. Few dared to travel beneath them, but the hobbits had no choice. To the east lay danger, to the north snow, and to the south rumors of dark men and creeping things. So they entered the woods. For many days they saw no sky, only green shadows and shafts of light that pierced the canopy like liquid gold. They spoke little. Even laughter felt too loud. Every sound seemed to belong to something unseen. Yet the forest did not harm them. It watched them pass, and perhaps, in its old wisdom, it recognized a gentle kind. When they emerged, blinking into the sunlight, the youngest among them whispered, "The trees let us through," and the elders nodded. West of the forests, they found rivers again, broad, calm waters winding between gentle hills. Here the Stores felt at home. They taught the others how to build flat-bottomed boats, how to cast lines for silver fish, how to steer by the current. Children laughed as they floated downstream. The sound of oars against the water became their heartbeat. And though they knew they must keep moving, each bend of the river felt like a promise of peace. In quiet coves, they left small offerings, a loaf of bread, a handful of berries, a silent thank you to the waters that carried them safely another day. By now, the hobbits had traveled so long that wandering was no longer a burden. It was life itself. They had learned to live lightly, to carry only what they needed, to share what they had, and to leave no mark except kindness. They found that the world, though vast and wild, would often return the gentleness given to it. A fox might share warmth by a campfire's edge. A flock of birds might lead them to water. Even storms seemed to pass more quickly when faced with patience. And so the small folk grew wise without knowing it. They learned that safety lies not in walls, but in the way you walk. That home is not always a place. Sometimes it is the peace you carry inside you. At last, after many generations, the land began to soften. The wind lost its bite. The hills grew round and green. They came upon a wide river shining under the sun, the Brandywine, though it would not bear that name for many years. Beyond it lay rolling fields, gentle woods, and soil that smelled of life. The elders stopped and stood in silence. Here was a land that seemed to breathe the same rhythm they did, calm, humble, enduring. They built small shelters to test the ground. They planted again. The earth answered kindly. Birds nested near their camps without fear. It felt, finally, like arrival. They did not know it yet, but they had found the place where all their wandering would one day end. When the first harvest came, they celebrated not with trumpets, but with gratitude. A loaf of bread passed from hand to hand, a song whispered instead of sung. The night was still, and the stars shone brighter than they ever remembered. No one called it destiny. No one spoke of fate. They simply rested. Generations would pass before anyone spoke the word shire, but the heart of it began here, in this long journey, in every careful step westward, in every story told beside a low fire. And when they finally slept that night, the road that had carried them for centuries kept on moving in their dreams, a soft, endless path under the moon, leading always toward home. So ended the great wandering, not with conquest or discovery, but with rest. For even the smallest traveler, given time and kindness, will find the place where their heart can finally be still. At last, the long road ended. After generations of quiet footsteps, after lifetimes spent chasing safer valleys and gentler skies, the small folk reached a land that felt like it had been waiting for them. It was a green country, not fierce or wild like the mountains, nor endless and lonely like the meadows behind them. Here, the hills rolled soft as blankets, and rivers whispered instead of roared. There were forests, yes, but not the kind that swallowed travelers whole. These woods breathed calmly, and sunlight fell through their leaves like warm honey. The hobbits stopped. They listened, and for the first time in a very long while, they heard something that sounded like peace. Two brothers stood at the edge of a wide, slow river. The sun rested low on the horizon, turning the water gold. Their names were Marcho and Blanco, Harfoots by blood, though the road had given them the hearts of all three clans. They had been scouts, leading their people farther west than any hobbit before them. Behind them stretched miles of worn paths and soft songs. Ahead lay green promise, a land untouched by war or fear. Blanco looked to his brother and smiled. "Shall we?" Marcho nodded, and together they crossed the Brandywine River, wading through the shallows with laughter that echoed like the first note of a new song. On the far bank, they found the land fertile and kind. Rabbits darted between the bushes. Apples hung heavy on trees no one had tended. The soil came away rich and dark in their hands. "This'll do," said Marcho simply. And with those quiet words, the Shire was born. The first months were full of gentle work. Holes were dug into hillsides. Round doors fitted snug with polished wood. Chimneys raised carefully so that smoke curled upward like sleepy ghosts. The hobbits, long used to tents and wagons, marveled at the comfort of walls that didn't flap in the wind. They built close to one another, each family within walking distance of the next. No one wanted to be far from a friendly voice. The ground, fertile and forgiving, yielded easily to their touch. Gardens sprouted, fields grew, and the smell of fresh bread once again filled the air. They divided the land into farthings, quarters of a circle, though few of them cared for maps. What mattered was that everyone had enough, and that fences were low enough for neighbors to talk across. From among the elders, a leader was chosen. Not a king, never a king, but a thane, whose task was to speak when the Shire needed one voice. The first of that line was Booka of the Marish, steady of hand and patient of temper. He was not a ruler, but a reminder that order could exist without power, and that kindness could lead better than command. Around him grew the families that would shape Hobbit history for ages to come. There were the Bagginses, content and respectable, keepers of neat holes and good manners. The Tooks, a little taller and braver than most, who sometimes vanished for days, chasing rumors of faraway hills. The Brandybucks, bold and fond of rivers, living east of the water, where boats drifted like dreams. And of course, the Proudfeet, yes, Proudfeet, who insisted on the plural and made sure everyone remembered it. Each family brought its own flavor to the land. Some grew food, some brewed ale, some told stories so often that truth and fiction shook hands and became friends. Seasons settled like dust on a shelf. Spring returned each year, and with it the scent of turned earth and rain. Summer meant feasts, fields heavy with grain, and nights filled with music under lantern light. Autumn was harvest and laughter. Barrels rolled down lanes. Pies cooled on windowsills, and every hobbit claimed that their mushrooms were the best in all 4 farthings. Winter brought quiet, fires crackling inside, children chasing each other through the snow, neighbors gathered around hearths swapping stories older than memory. In time, life became rhythm. Breakfast, second breakfast, elevensies, each meal another moment of gratitude. Every afternoon a nap to honor the fullness of living. Hobbits measured their days not by the clock, but by comfort, by the warmth of the kettle, by how full the larder was, and how many friends filled their table. It was the Fallowhides, of course, who invented the grand idea of birthday parties. Not content with a single candle or slice of cake, they insisted that a birthday should be a celebration for everyone. For what is joy if not shared? The custom spread quickly. By the next year, the entire shire sparkled with lanterns, ribbons, and laughter. There was food enough for all, and gifts, always given by the one celebrating, never received. That was the Hobbit way. Music drifted over the hills long into the night. Children danced barefoot in the grass, and elders tapped their feet, smiling that how good the world could be when no one was looking for trouble. By now, the shire had taken shape. Villages dotted the valleys: Hobbiton, Bywater, Tookland, Buckland, and more, each with its own charm, each a reflection of the hearts that built it. Hobbiton was tidy and cheerful, rows of round green doors tucked neatly under the hill. Bywater smelled of ale and sweet pies from the Green Dragon Inn. In Tookland, lanterns glowed brighter, and laughter carried farther into the night. And eastward, near the Brandywine, the Brandybucks made their homes in the hall at Bucklebury, where songs never seemed to end. Everywhere, gardens bloomed, roses climbing the sides of doorways, sunflowers turning to follow the morning light, and vegetables so fine that elves themselves might have envied the dinners they became. Inside the holes, warmth reigned. Walls lined with shelves of polished plates, fireplaces with stone mantles carved by careful hands. The smell of tea, tobacco, and fresh bread was constant, as though the shire itself breathed in comfort and exhaled contentment. It is said that hobbits perfected the art of doing nothing in particular. They found joy in simple repetition, walking familiar paths, trimming hedges, tending to the same small gardens year after year. Their wisdom was unspoken, that life does not need grandeur to be full, that peace is the quiet reward of consistency. When strangers passed through the shire, rare as that was, they were always struck by the stillness. It was not the stillness of emptiness, but of satisfaction, like a pond without ripples, reflecting only the sky. Every hobbit knew every other hobbit, and news traveled faster than a cart on a downhill slope. Gossip was their greatest sport, harmless, cheerful, and forgotten by morning. When day faded, the hills of the shire glowed gold and green. Smoke rose in thin trails from dozens of chimneys, curling into the cool air like gentle spirits. Lanterns flickered to life beneath round doors. The hum of dinner tables carried across the fields, the clink of cups, the murmur of stories. the laughter that grows soft when bellies are full. Crickets sang in the hedges. A dog barked once and then thought better of it. Somewhere near the hill, a fiddle began to play, slow and sweet, its melody winding through the dusk like a friendly ghost. If you had walked the lanes then, you might have seen a dozen tiny windows glowing warm against the night. Inside, families gathered close, the world outside forgotten. Years passed, and generations were born who no longer remembered the wandering. The stories of Marcho and Blanco became legend, the kind told to children just before bed, their edges softened by time and kindness. The Shire knew no war, no kings, no soldiers. It had no need for walls or weapons. Its borders were simple, wherever the grass grew thick and the people were kind. There was time for everything, for planting, for resting, for long talks beside the fire, and for the easy silence that only true peace can hold. Even the passing of days felt slower here, as though the land itself was in no hurry. If you listen closely, you might still hear it, the heartbeat of the Shire, soft and steady beneath the turning of the earth. It was never about riches or glory. It was about belonging, about knowing the names of the hills and the sounds of the morning birds, about waking each day certain that you were exactly where you were meant to be. And perhaps that is why the hobbits endured. When empires crumbled and legends faded, they stayed. For they had built something stronger than stone, a life that asked for little and gave everything that mattered in return. As the sun sinks behind the far hills, the Shire falls into its nightly rhythm. A last cup of tea, a final laugh at the doorstep. Doors close with soft thuds, and candles flicker out one by one. The fields grow quiet, the river hums a lullaby, and stars bloom above like lanterns hung by the Valar themselves. Somewhere under the hill, a hobbit yawns, stretches, and pulls the quilt to his chin. Outside, the wind moves gently through the grass, and everything, every door, every heart, is at rest. And so the Shire was founded, not by kings, not by conquest, but by the quiet courage to stop wandering, to plant roots where the heart felt safe, to build a home and call it enough. In the heart of the Shire, where the hills meet the rivers and the roads smell faintly of grass after rain, there are names whispered with fondness, names that mean more than lineage or title. They are the threads of everyday life, the heartbeat of home. For in the Shire, a family name isn't just a mark of who you are. It's a story, a recipe, a garden, a shared laugh over tea. And though each name carries its own quirks, together they weave the gentle tapestry of a people who found joy not in greatness, but in being themselves. If ever there was a name that meant comfort, it was Baggins. The Bagginses of Hobbiton were polite to a fault, fond of routine, and suspicious of anything that smelled of adventure or unplanned excitement. They liked order, teacups stacked just so, meals served at precise times, and handkerchiefs always within reach. Their smiles, those round homes under the hills, were the coziest in all the land. You could tell a Baggins hole by its perfectly polished doorknob, its gleaming dishes in the window, and the smell of freshly baked seed cake drifting down the lane. They believed in good manners above all else. If you were invited to tea, you'd best arrive exactly on time, not a minute late, and never early. A Baggins valued predictability, and in that predictability, they found peace. It was said that the only thing a Baggins disliked more than bad weather was the idea of leaving home without a proper plan. And yet, from this very line would come a hobbit who did just that, one Bilbo Baggins, who would go on to change the world and still be home in time for supper. But that is a tale for another night. If the Bagginses were the shire's hearth, the Tooks were its spark. Taller than most, louder than some, and braver, or more foolish, depending on who you asked. They lived in the green hills of Tookland, where laughter echoed longer and stories grew taller with every retelling. The Tooks had a gleam in their eyes, a glimmer that made other hobbits whisper, "There's a bit of the elves in them, mark my words." No one knew if it was true, but the rumor suited them, so the Tooks never bothered to deny it. They loved the unexpected. If a fair was held, a Took would climb the stage. If a thunderstorm rolled in, a Took would dance in the rain. If a stranger passed through the shire, a Took would invite them to supper just to hear tales of faraway lands. Adventure in small and secret ways still lingered in their blood. They built larger homes than most, full of laughter, books, and rooms that nobody ever counted. Some Tooks collected maps, others practiced archery, and more than one had been known to disappear over the hills for a week or two, returning only with a wild grin and a story that no one quite believed. Yet, for all their mischief, the Tooks were beloved, for they reminded the Shire that even peace needs a touch of wonder. Across the Brandywine River, where the mist rises early and the ale tastes just a bit stronger, lived the Brandybucks. They were river folk, broad-shouldered, bold, and slightly wilder than their cousins across the water. If the Shire had rules, the Brandybucks were content to bend them. They built their great home, Brandy Hall, into the side of a hill so wide and deep that it was said a traveler could walk its tunnels for an hour and still not find the same doorway twice. The Brandybucks loved boats, a scandalous hobby to most hobbits who saw water as something to drink, not to float upon. But to the Brandybucks, the river was a friend. They rowed, fished, and sang songs that rolled with the current. They brewed fine ale, ate heartily, and told stories louder than the waves. Their laughter often carried across the river at night, a warm hum that made the rest of the Shire smile in spite of itself. If a Took was unpredictable, a Brandybuck was unstoppable. And if you mixed the two, you were bound to end up with trouble, or perhaps greatness. Further down the lane, In homes humbler but no less loved, lived the Gamzees. They were gardeners, builders, and fixers of all things practical. Their hands were calloused, their hearts steady. If something broke in Hobbiton, a Gamzee would mend it. If a garden needed tending, a Gamzee would already be there, kneeling in the soil before the sun came up. They were not scholars or storytellers, but they understood the land better than anyone. They could look at a leaf and know if rain was coming, touch the ground and tell how deep the roots ran. Their homes were smaller, their meals simpler, but there was a glow in every Gamzee hearth that could outshine gold. And though they never sought fame, it would one day find them. For from that same line there would rise a gardener whose courage would carry the weight of the world. The Bolgers were cheerful folk, fond of gatherings, good food, and long naps after them. If there was a festival, a Bolger could always be found in the middle of it, singing, laughing, or convincing others to take one more slice of pie. They were known for their hospitality. A Bolger home always had room for one more guest, and two if they brought dessert. They were fond of storytelling, though their stories tended to wander almost as much as their attention spans. They were not great travelers, but within their own hills and lanes, they were kings of kindness. And then there were the proud feet. Yes, proud feet, never proud foots, as one famously corrected at a certain birthday party long after. The proud feet were sturdy and set in their ways. Their feet were large even by hobbit standards, and they took great pride in them, often walking barefoot to show off their tough soles and perfectly groomed hair. They were quiet folk, fond of routine and early mornings. If you wanted to know the time, you could ask a proud feet. Their entire day was a clock of chores and habits. But behind their stern looks was a deep warmth, a sense of belonging that came from generations of doing things the same good way. A proud feet garden was always neat, their fences freshly painted, their tea brewed to perfection. And though they grumbled about noise and nonsense, they always smiled when the children ran by laughing. Beyond the famous names, there were countless others: millers, bakers, carpenters, and brewers. Families who rose before dawn and slept with the stars still glowing. Each one added a thread to the shire's gentle weave. The millers kept the water wheels turning, their rhythmic creak echoing across the fields. The bakers filled the lanes with the scent of warm bread, their ovens glowing like small suns. The brewers tended to their casks in quiet pride, and the gardeners, oh, the gardeners, kept everything alive. There was no fame here, no fortune, only purpose, and that was enough. In the Shire, every lane had its own sound. The laughter of children in one, the creak of a cart in another, a whistle from a window, a broom brushing a doorstep, a kettle singing softly to itself. Evening meant voices carrying through the dusk, a greeting here, a question there. News passed along without hurry. Each word, each chuckle was a small stone in the foundation of home. If you listened closely, you could hear the pulse of a community that measured wealth not by gold, but by the warmth of company. Together, the Bagginses, Tooks, Brandybucks, Gamgees, Bolgers, Proudfeet, and all the rest created something rare. A world where everyone had a place, where laughter traveled faster than gossip, where even the smallest act of kindness could ripple through the hills like sunlight. It wasn't perfect. No place ever is. There were arguments over fences, grumbles about weather, and debates about who made the best ale. But none of it lingered long. For the Shire's true strength was in how quickly its people forgave and how easily they returned to joy. And so, as night falls again, lanterns glow in every window, and the inns fill with quiet song. In the Green Dragon at Bywater, someone raises a mug of amber grail and calls, "To the families!" And laughter answers back. From the corner where the Tooks are telling tales, from the table where the Bagginses nod approvingly, from the hearth where a Gamgee warms his hands. Outside, the stars blink softly, as though to join the cheer. So live the families of the Shire, each one a note in the same gentle song. Polite or proud, bold or humble, they remind us that happiness is not in what we chase, but in what we tend. A garden, a friendship, a story told one more time before sleep. There came a time when even stories grew tired. Wars faded into rumor. The roads grew still, and the Shire, that small green cradle of comfort, entered its quiet age. It was an age without heroes or battles, an age where nothing much happened, and that was exactly how everyone liked it. The hills were soft as always, the rivers ran steady. The sky was a calm and endless blue by day, and a lantern of stars by night. In the mornings, farmers stepped out into dew-silvered fields. They bent to their work with gentle hands, turning the earth, planting seed, whistling tunes older than memory. The air smelled of clover and warm soil. The sound of a hoe striking ground was the heartbeat of the Shire itself. By noon, smoke curled from chimneys, and the lanes filled with the scents of baking and brew. Doors stood open. Neighbors traded gossip over fences. Children chased butterflies down the lane, their laughter carrying like wind chimes. At dusk, when the sun sank low behind the hills, the light softened to gold. Windows glowed. Lanterns flickered beneath ivy-covered eaves. And somewhere, always somewhere, a fiddle began to play. Music was the soul of the Shire, not the proud kind sung by minstrels before kings, but the kind that hums quietly while bread rises in the oven, the kind that lingers in your head long after you've gone to bed. There were festivals, too. The free fair on the White Downs every 7 years, the midsummer dances in Tookland, and harvest feasts that went on until dawn. No speech was ever given there, no throne stood at the center, just long tables, bright laughter, and hearts so full that even the moon seemed to smile upon them. To measure wealth in the Shire, you counted not coins, but the number of full pantries before winter, the warmth of your hearth, and the number of friends who would still stop by uninvited. Gold had little use. It couldn't make the grass greener or the pies tastier. But a well-made chair, a sturdy kettle, a loaf shared freely, these were treasures. A hobbit might spend an afternoon repairing a gate or helping a neighbor stack firewood, then sit together afterward in companionable silence, watching the evening mist drift across the fields. That was wealth. That was enough. Beyond the Shire, kingdoms still rose and fell. Kings schemed in marble halls. Armies clashed. Cities burned and were rebuilt again. But all of that seemed impossibly far away. The hobbits read about it sometimes, a passing mention in a dusty book, or a rumor carried by travelers. But the words felt like stories from another world. Their maps ended where the green fields faded. Everything beyond was labeled elsewhere, and elsewhere was not their concern. Some said the Shire survived because it was hidden. Others said it survived because it was kind. Perhaps both were true. Perhaps peace, once planted deeply enough, can protect itself better than any sword. And so, while great men worried about crowns, the hobbits guarded something rarer: laughter, friendship, and the small magic of everyday life. A kettle whistling on the fire, a pie cooling on the sill, the gentle rustle of pages as someone read by lamplight. No bards sang of these things, but perhaps they should have, for sometimes the smallest folk keep the greatest treasures. If you stood on the hill at night, you could see all of it. The quiet lights of Hobbiton scattered like fallen stars, the faint glow of Bywater across the fields, the silver line of the Brandywine winding in the distance. The air smelled faintly of smoke and apples. The world seemed impossibly gentle, and somewhere a voice hummed an old tune, a song without words, a melody the land itself might have written. It was said that time moved slower here, that the years in the Shire were softer than elsewhere. Maybe the stars themselves paused longer over those hills, as if reluctant to leave such peace behind. The hobbits did not think themselves wise. They thought only of breakfast and weather and birthdays. But in their smallness was truth, that joy lives in the ordinary, that love grows best close to the ground. They tended their gardens as if each flower was a promise to the world, that beauty need not shout to be seen. They sang softly to their children, and in those lullabies lived the history of all their kind. While the rest of Middle-earth struggled and fought, the hobbits kept the rhythm of peace alive, so that when the world grew weary, it could remember how to rest. And so the Shire slept beneath the stars, a small green heart beating quietly at the center of a vast and troubled world. Its gift was simple, its lesson clear, that peace, once cherished, can outlast all storms. And now the candles dim in Bag End. The night grows quiet once more. Somewhere in the hill, A hobbit closes his round green door, and the latch clicks softly into place. Outside, the moon drifts above the fields, and the wind carries the smell of fresh bread through the lanes of Hobbiton. The party tree stands still under starlight, its branches sighing like a lullaby. In every window, a last candle flickers, then fades. All is well. All is at rest. If you listen closely, you might hear the soft shuffle of bare feet on stone, the creak of a chair, the slow turning of a page before sleep. Beyond the hill, the brandywine murmurs its endless song, and the grass sways gently like waves upon a quiet sea. Breathe with it now. Slow, steady, peaceful. The long journey has ended. The roads are behind us, and the shire lies safe and still. Let your thoughts grow soft, like petals folding at dusk. Let the warmth of the hearth fill your chest. The hobbits have found their rest, and so should you. Close your eyes. The world is kind tonight. Nothing stirs but dreams. Sleep well, traveler of Middle-earth. You have walked far, but peace was always waiting here. May your heart find its home in quiet places, and may even the smallest dream carry you far.